Okay, so we're back. A couple of things I need to mention. I was actually looking over this file comparing to the one that we were doing in class, and this map, I actually used a different map in class. I don't think it really makes a difference because it's just illustrating a point, but if you're looking for consistency between the two files, we kind of messed that up. I'm not going to worry about it. Excuse me. Okay, so, another thing I noticed is I thought because I had to turn on and off the video a couple of times on account of not being able to work it properly, I did not actually show you how to do this thing, which we never got to in class. This up here creates a background image that you can apply to your 2D view. Well, I guess it seems that once applied, you cannot sort of go back to it. Anyway, if you click on this, the first time you click on this, it will give you an opportunity to apply a PNG to it. And that's why instead of importing, or rather linking the UV image that I had in my PSD, instead of linking it, because for some reason it wants an external file here. Don't ask me why. So I actually saved that out as a PNG, and I click this, and the first time you click it, it'll give you a dialog, and you enter your file, and now I can toggle it on and off, which is great because, oh wait, is this, no, okay, that does the same thing. Anyway, that's the answer to that question that we had in class. So let's get back to blocking out these issues that we have here. I'm having problems with my bolts here, and the reason is, let's toggle this off, is that we've got this thing that we're overlaying. So here we've got nice pretty bolts here. This is our actual normal map. What we're doing here is we're taking something and we're actually overlaying it onto. So these aren't really truly normals. So there's going to be discrepancies, and what we're doing here is something very stylistic, and it's also illustrating a point. But it's making things really messy and dirty in through here. So what we want to do is we want to go take what we have on our original actual baked normal map and superimpose it back on top of this mess here, because this mess we liked, because this is actually overlaying on something very smooth. This mess is just mess. So we're going to take another blend, and we are going to be laying it on top of this. So we're going to put this one in the middle, and then we want to actually apply the information from this map back on top of this with a mask. So we will be masking this one. Unlike this blend, we're going to keep this as a pure cutout. So we're not going to actually blend anything. We're going to keep this at opacity 1. I'm going to keep this at opacity 1. I'm going to keep this at copy, which basically means I'm just taking one and I'm opaquely slapping it up on top of the other one. Now we have to find our mask. So I'm going back to my Explorer, and this Space Wheels 2 color map is something, this is actually the mask that I had created in ZBrush in order to do the colors. So this is my color mask, and it happened to have the bolts on it. So it's not going to be a perfect mask because there's this, but it's good enough for illustration purposes. Now, because it's a mask, the first thing we need to do is turn this to grayscale. And then the second thing is that currently this is black and this is white. This is the exact opposite of what we want. So we're going to have to invert it. So we go back to the library. Now I can type invert in here, and it will give me whatever it's got inverted. This is something I use a lot, so I also favorited it. And what we want is invert grayscale, and that's exactly what it does. It inverts grayscale. So we're going to plug this into here, and now we've got the opposite. So this mask, our nice bolts, we're going to lay on top using just the bolts. So what this did was that really cleaned it up for us, because if we look back on here, see we've got all this artifacting from the overlay, and we just went ahead and reapplied our initial baked out map on top of that. So let's have that reflect in here by plugging it into our normal channel. And all of a sudden we can really, I mean, it's imperfect, obviously, because like in these really strong areas, if I really wanted to use this and I was actually doing this, I would go back in Photoshop in here and I would make this perfect. But this is good enough for government work, and we're going to move on. So we've now applied a stylized thingy to our baked out normal map using a variety of blends and a variety of masks. So we're going to pause here, and we will return then and do, why don't we do the roughness map next? Okay, so before we go any further, let's organize ourselves a little bit here, make a little bit of room. What we can do is we can highlight all of these guys here. We can right-click on the field, and we can add a frame. And this is a great way of keeping your stuff organized and together, because once it's on the frame, you can kind of move it as a block, and these things can get really big. So this is a really nice feature to have. In addition to frames, we can also add comments. So let's just, for the sake of argument, okay, we can, this one we're going to potentially expose this one. So let's give it a name. I like to make comments on the nodes that I'm exposing, because this way it becomes, if it's got a title, if it's got a comment, so I'm going to do add comment. And I'm funny, I like my comments on top. That's just me. You can put wherever you want. And then you can change your comment again here in the properties box. So we're going to call this, I don't know, globe bump. So this way, once and we can do the same thing with the frame. So you highlight the frame, you go into its properties box, and you can call it what you want. We're going to call this normals. And this is a really great way of keeping things organized. When I do expose things, if you've got a lot of things that are exposed, and as you're putting the material together, and you're thinking about what you're going to expose and what you're not going to expose, it just makes it easier. It's easier later on when I go to start creating inputs to already have a name for it, already have a sort of an idea of where it's going to go in the scheme of things. And it's just, I like keeping organized as I go because it makes life easier. Okay, so let's do the roughness now. We are going to we have a bunch of maps here, and what I want to do is I want to sort of split this thing up into zones that I'm going to have the capacity to do different things with. So I want to have sort of these metal bands here be different from the main metal up in here. So that's the first thing we're going to address. So again, we're going to use a blend node for this. Okay, that's our roughness right here. So currently we just have this color plugged in here. And I have a bunch of masks. I don't remember how I did this. Okay. Bands mask. We're definitely going to want that. We have our... We already used that rough. That's from the old one. So let's see what we have. Well, we're going to use that eventually. I think, yeah, I think that's what I did in the example. I think I used my color map, and I used it for my roughness map. We've got, these are so low, low chroma. I mean, this is essentially a black and white. I mean, technically it's a color, but we're going to turn. We're gonna use this both ways. We're going to use this as a color map, and we're going to use it as a black and white map. So color is more processing intensive. So especially if you're using it for something like grayscale, it pays to step it down and then step it back up again. I mean, I shouldn't say step it down, to turn it into grayscale. Yeah, that's more like it. And it makes a big difference. And then we're gonna create, since doing roughness is a black and white thing, the map is going to read, if something is completely white, it's going to be absolutely matte. If it's black, it's absolutely glossy. And then you're dealing with all your grayscales in between. So we are going to kind of do this by hand. Now we want, it doesn't really matter which one's rougher, which one's lighter. It's just we know that we're going to want them different. In fact, we're going to expose these things so that people can tweak it however they want to tweak it. So the important thing here is to actually split this up into zones that you then expose, and people can actually change the parameters. So what we really want to do is we want to change the lightness of what's going on in here depending on our masks. So what we want is a hue, saturation, lightness, or we can, again, right-click, add node, hue, saturation, lightness. Now you'll notice that this wants a color input. It's not going to work with a black and white input. We could turn this back. This is irritating. We could turn this back into color, but you know, it's a question of doing the math. Let's see what happens. I'm willing to bet that I'm better off turning this up, turning into black and white, getting from my library, from my favorites, a gradient map, which is going to take a black and white grayscale and it's going to turn it into a color. So let's turn this back into grayscale and plug it into here. This is going to turn it back into color, and it's going into the hue, saturation, lightness. Now, if we add all these numbers up, so it's, I don't know, about 29, it's about 30. Let's get rid of this. It's not going to like this. And let's, so here you see already we're saving almost 10 milliseconds. I'm really bad at math, but in the aggregate, it definitely pays to do this. Because when you add these numbers up, they're going to be, and these change. I mean, I think every time it does a little bit different, but it gives you an idea of what's efficient and what's not. So, okay, we can also dock this gradient map. If I press the letter D, it will dock it. This does it, and if I want to undock it, I highlight and press the letter D again. This is just for clutter's sake. So what we're doing here is we've taken our color map and essentially turned it into a grayscale because we're going to be messing around in grayscale. here's one. I'm going to dock this because it's irritating me. One of the things that we're doing here, we're going to get a blend. So blend, add node, blend. We're kind of going to be overlaying things on themselves. So I have a hue, saturation, lightness here, and I'm going to have it affect one of these areas. This one on top is going to be masked out, so this one on top is going to be dealing with these bands here. I'm going to actually copy this, Control C, and Control V for paste, because I want the exact same thing on the bottom. So the one on top is going to have this bitmap from my Photoshop, which I'm going to turn into a grayscale. It's going to act as my mask. Okay, so if we go into this one, actually let's highlight on this. So I'm double clicking on the one that I want to see in here, and I can single click, just like we did with the vector graphics. I'm single clicking on this node, and then this node's information is now in here, and now it lets me see on the other piece what's going on. So you see how we masked that out, and as I'm changing the lightness, this is getting lighter or darker only in that area that is being affected by the mask. So black means it's not showing up at all. White means it's 100%. We've got no gray area in this mask. And then what we can also do, so I'm double clicking on this again, and if I single click on the bottom one, so that's going to be everything except for those bands, I can do the same thing, and now I'm having the opposite thing happen. So by doing that, what I've essentially done is I've split this map up into two pieces. Each one of these is toggleable. So before we get any further, let's put some comments on these, because, you know, again, we're planning on exposing these later on. So I'm going to do this, right click, add comment, and we're calling this bands rough. Oops. Okay. And then we're going to call this one, right click, add comment. I think I called it main metal roughness. I did the class thing about 2 weeks ago, so don't ask me to remember the names. We're going to call this main metal rough. Right. So let's see what this looks like when we replace out this sort of neutral. Again, I'm dragging with my left mouse button, and then I can move all of these. While I have them in here, I might as well, since I've got them all highlighted, right click in the field and add a frame. Yeah, it's sometimes. Now I'm holding control and I'm clicking on them singly, because I don't want to, well, I could have also just highlighted the whole thing, and then you can also do this. You can go like this and then remove, by holding down control, remove the things that you don't want to deal with. It's going to, by default, if you move the frame, it's going to move all of them. If you want to move them within the frame, you kind of have to highlight them by themselves and then move them around. Okay, so this now, because this was giving color outputs, this is now giving a color output, and we want a grayscale input in here. So we're going to do the opposite of a gradient map, which is convert to grayscale. This, and like this, and I'm going to dock this by pressing D. So now we can take a look and see in real time on our model here what we're doing. Okay, so let's toggle these. Let's find it. I pressed F, which is going to focus it on that thing. My pivot point was off, so I just clicked and pressed F. Okay, that's good. Okay, so let's start with this one and see what happens. That's our bands. So we're now changing the roughness of those bands. Now, it's affecting those bolts at the same time, but that's going to be our next step. So you can see what's going on in here is being reflected in the model in here. If I'm panning it like this by using the middle mouse button and pressing Alt. And then I'm zooming in and out by using my left mouse button and again with Alt. And focusing with F. Alright, so then we can also do the same thing with the other one as well. We went down to the bottom for the main metal, and again by shifting our lightness, you see that's very rough because it's white, and then if we go back to black, that's going to be super shiny. Which you can't really tell on this white, but yeah, it's pretty shiny. Okay, but this has got sort of the main things covered, but what it's missing out is those little details of the little stars here and the little bolts. So, oh, let's rename our frame to roughness. And we can get rid of this by highlighting it and pressing delete. Or if we've got a whole bunch of things that are just kind of cluttering things up, if you do this with clean, anything that's not connected to a node, to an output node, is going to get cleaned up for you. So if I do like this and clean, it just disappeared that extra node there for me. So, you know, if you've just got like one little node, you usually do delete. But if you've got a whole bunch of things, then I'll usually use clean. So let's add some more stuff onto our roughness. So I'm going to pull this out. I can resize my frame like this by left clicking and just dragging. So I have somewhere in here, and I believe it's in my Photoshop. I'm going to double click on this. I want to see what I've got here. No, it's not the one. Oh, okay. I'm going to go back to this color 2 map that I used up here. And I'm going to use this as a mask for this as well. I think what I'm going to do with this one, and this is just the way I prefer to work. If I've got masks that I'm sharing, you know, that I've got like different things, like the same mask is being used for a bunch of different stuff, I'll usually drag them out, and I'll have them like in a line here, so I have all my masks kind of in a row, and then they kind of feed out into where they need to feed out, and I usually put the inverted in that same row. So because sometimes this mask I'm going to want positive, sometimes I'm going to want it negative, and so essentially I treat them all the same. You can organize them how you want to organize them. But by pulling them back like this, it means that they've kind of got an overview of the whole thing, and you can, it's easy to sort of connect them to everything. So this map gives me this highlight information. In this particular case, yeah, I think I want to use the inverted one, because I mean, you could do it either way, but this is just easier to sort of conceptualize, I think. So we're going to be affecting, we're going to create one more of these hue, saturation, lightness nodes. So let's pull that out right now. And we're going to, again, be affecting this original map. Oh, and notice what it did here. It knows this needs a color. So I just dragged, let's do that again. I just dragged this grayscale into here, and instead of giving me that dotted red line that it does when it really, really doesn't like things, it just went ahead and just put that gradient map in there for me, you know, without giving me an error message, because it knows, you know, it's smart like that, which is also nice. So we're going to be affecting this once more, except now, again, we're going to bring in another blend, except now the mask that we're going to be using is the mask for our highlights. And then let's see what this gives us. I think it probably makes more sense up here. So again, this got really small because the blend node depends on the background input for its sizing information. So eventually it's going to have a, you know, the 2K map in there, but for right now, why don't we just up it, because again, it's working off this 256 by 256 parent size. If we just bump it up, in this case by 3, it brings us back to 2048. So it just, right now, before, you know, it's gonna be too much later, but for right now, just so we can see what's going on, it just makes it easier to read, and it's not gonna be all pixelated. So what this hue saturation lightness, as we've masked it out right now, is affecting only sort of this bolt area and the little star things. So again, you know, this isn't a perfect map. This is because it's actually dealing more with shadows. But again, for illustration purposes, this is just fine. You know, if you're actually dealing with masking out things, you really want exact maps. So you would go back in here and you might want to draw over by hand with, you know, in Photoshop. It really depends on what you're doing. So we are going to take, let's take a step back here. This is the output. It's just got crazy this. Let's make this a little bit more normal so we can see what's going on. So this is the overlay of these two. So this is what we're going to now take this third piece. We're basically just daisy chaining them in, and we're going to put it on top of that. Now you'll notice, because we had bumped up the output size, that this is now too big. So we're just going to bring this back down to 0. So here we have, oh, and let's make a comment on this one. Again, right click, add comment, and we're going to call this highlights. Highlight rough. And I like it up on top. And we're going to add this in here. So basically all we've done in here now is you've got one more sort of overlay. See this, now those can go lighter or darker. We did this in this order because we wanted this one on top of these other two, because we're not doing an overlay, and we are controlling these as opacity cutouts, you know, like opaque cutouts. There's no fade involved, and you know, so you do the big stuff first, and then you do your details on top. Okay, so that is, and let's see how this looks on the map here. So you can't really tell. So that's very rough. Am I doing the right one here? No, I don't think I am. No, there we go. So you see that's dealing just with those highlights. Anyway, I think that's enough for this video. We will pick up in the next one. We can do the metallic map, which will be super simple, because basically we're going to use the same map. We're going to make a copy of it, and we're going to just adjust it for our metallics, because we're going to be dealing with the same areas. So it's going to look very, very simple, except we're going to be just using flat colors. All right, so we're going to pause it for now. Well, actually, we're going to make a new video for the next one. I think this one has gotten long enough.